it was not until I accepted Christ, I met a man, right? So it was a relationship was built between Matt and myself that showed me who Christ was and allowed me to build that relationship with Christ. And that allowed me to build relationships with everybody else. I could then become human. Calvin then helped me become human. It showed me what it meant to be a human being.
You're listening to the Forum Podcast, a production of Calvin Theological Seminary.
Shawn, welcome to the Forum Podcast. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I know you are an MTS student here at the seminary. You're residential, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about who you are and kind of how you got here. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. I'm a student at Calvin Theological Seminary and proud to be so. I graduated from the Calvin Prison Initiative, where I had spent about 10 years of my life working and studying with that program at the end of a 35-year prison sentence. I graduated. Turns out I did very well in academics, and then I got out of prison. I wasn't supposed to. It was a gift from God in my life. Now I go here with my goal is to teach in these prison programs as an example of what God can do in your life and how he moves in the world. And the Calvin Prison Initiative, in fact, is one long example of how God has moved in the world, his providential care. Back in the early 2010, I believe, a member of the Calvin Theological Seminary family named John Rotman had gone to Angola. Afterwards, he thought, wow, this would be great if we could do this in Michigan. There happened to be a family who had a son in prison who was connected with churches and the seminary. And that son was at a prison, Hanlon, in Ionia, and wrote a proposal with John Rotman and I think David Reilersdam and a couple other professors and said, we would like to run unaccredited college classes, enrichment classes for the men at Hanlon. This proposal sat on the desk of the warden for months, to the point where these guys were just like, oh, nice try, but I guess we're... Then one day, the director of the MDOC was making rounds of prisons, and he ended up at Hanlon. And he toured the prison, was in the warden's office before he left, and just before he left, the warden said, you know what, while you're here, I have this proposal from Calvin Theological Seminary that I don't know what to do with. It's been on my desk all summer. He goes, the director said, Calvin Theological Seminary, give them what they want. Turns out his name was Dan Hines, and he had graduated from Calvin. His father, there's a dorm named after his grandfather, who was a major mover in prison reform in the state of Michigan. And the last thing Dan Hines did before he left his post as the director of the Michigan Department of Corrections was sign the agreement between Calvin Theological Seminary, Calvin College, and the MDOC to provide accredited classes for the CPI program. So the series of coincidences that led up to this becoming a thing is mind-boggling. So it's either coincidence or it's providence.
I would say that's providence. I didn't realize there were so many connections just between all of those people.
So part of what I do, my job, is I'm a project director for a group called the Michigan Consortium for Higher Education in Prison. This is 14 prisons now, 14 prisons, 15 institutions. The reason there's a difference is Calvin Theological Seminary and Calvin University are partners. Hope Western are partners, so they're not counted. So these institutions, though, are all members of my CHEP. None of those would exist without Calvin Theological Seminary's move in 2011 to provide unaccredited college classes to men in prison. The reason that we have 14 institutions, prison institutions, offering college, the MDOC allowing college, is because of Calvin Theological Seminary.
Wow.
That is God's work.
Absolutely.
God's work in Michigan.
That's insane. Are there other states that you know of that have such a large span of programs like this, or is Michigan pretty unique?
Michigan leads the way.
Wow.
So Michigan has really, the MDOC has dedicated themselves to this idea of higher education in prison. I mean, and it's obvious why. All of the Bureau of Statistics, Justice Statistics, bears this out, that higher education, for every dollar spent on higher education, you save $4 in incarceration fees. The recidivism rates drop from, in some cases, 65% recidivism down to 15 or under.
Wow.
So an associate's degree is 15%. Only 15% of the men who get an associate's degree in prison recidivate. If you get a bachelor's degree, that number drops to below 5%.
Wow.
And the seminary and Calvin College, at the time Calvin College, now it's Calvin University, together were the first to offer a bachelor's degree in the state of Michigan. So from that wellspring, we now have living water.
Yeah. So help me kind of understand your, journey into CPI. Was CPI already kind of in existence and going when you entered as a student, or were you part of that inaugural class?
No, I was part of the first class.
Wow.
And this is another example of how God's providence, in not only in big things but in small things, work. So I did not grow up Christian. I went to prison when I was 18 years old for murder and was told that I would die in prison. So I lived accordingly, with all the bad and all of the despair and loss of hope that would entail, Mm-hmm. And then in 2014, I was transferred to a prison where I met a man named Matt Mikowski. And he lived his life unlike anybody I'd ever seen. He had some issues that to me seemed to lead to like anger and rage, but yet he didn't live in anger and rage. He kind of just continued to be the person that he wanted to be. And finally I just had to know. So I asked him, how is it, given your circumstances, you live your life like this? And he said, I'm glad you asked. And he introduced me to Jesus Christ. Before that, I did not like Christianity. I was a pagan. And my life changed. This was in November of 2014. In February, there was a flyer that said, come get a Christian education. And I said, okay, if that's what you want from me, I'll give it a shot. I wasn't sure how I was supposed to serve. I knew that I was supposed to serve God somehow, but I didn't know how. This flyer wasn't posted. This was brought to me by a person who happened to work in the education building of the prison.
Wow.
So it seemed pretty clear that God had this in mind. I signed up. I was accepted, one of 20 for the first class. Was transferred to Hanlon, and it turns out I had a talent for it and enjoyed every minute of it.
I love that. Could you walk me through a little bit, was your academic schedule similar to kind of what you experienced here at the seminary? How did the class timing work? What was that all like? Yeah,
so the goal of CPI had always been to make the college in prison program more like than unlike the experience on campus. So within the, the bounds of security, we did the same things that they did on campus. We had a library with 4,000 books donated by the seminary and the college and LeGrand family. The LeGrand family donated just a ton of books to us. So we had a huge library and a place to go and study. Our classes were very rigorous, to the point where, we had professors who would come in from the seminary to teach in our program, and they just would not change their syllabus. They'd just be like, yeah, this is what I use on campus. So they're teaching in master's programs, and they expected us to do that work. It was just the expectation. And we did it, and we loved it. And we were hungry for it, when there were security concerns, then we adapted. So the day we took a Soch final, we were locked down, and they had to march us over into the classroom to take our final on the day that they had the prison locked down. So there were always these challenges to overcome, but we did, because the goal was to create a program that showed people what was possible. We had a warden at the facility. His name was Dwayne Burton, who was his goal before he retired was to make sure the CPI was up and running and sustainable. And he would bring in senators and congressmen and representatives and judges and everybody he could think of to say, this is what's happening. And it worked.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm sure you could share so many different stories, but could you share maybe a moment or a story or even a time in class at CPI that maybe was really influential in your faith formation? Or you've mentioned you knew God was calling you to serve in some capacity. Was there a moment that really confirmed that or helped plant that seed in you further?
Yeah, so the way I have taken to describing it is, Jesus dug a well in my life that wasn't there, right? He dug this well. But it was Calvin really that shored up the well. It was the Reformed tradition that was present in the narrative, right? Every class I had the same narrative: creation, fall, redemption, new creation, right? Every single one. You knew we were going to approach whatever we were learning through this lens: creation, fall, redemption, new creation. The first book I read in my DCM class, Engaging God's World by Cornelius Plantinga. And for me, that was it. That was what I said, this is who God is when he speaks to me. This is what I understand when I read the Bible. So that right there formed me. Almost as quickly as Jesus changed me when I accepted him into my life, this cemented what I believed. Now, there have been tweaks over the years as I learn more and as I deepen my understanding, but this set the groundwork. This laid the first bricks in that well of Christ in my life, that creation, fall, redemption, and new creation.
I love that. And for the first book to be Plantinga.
Oh, amazing.
How many things can top that?
Nothing tops that book.